It is I, King Dajala, back with another video. Nah, I'm playing. What's going on, guys? It's Professor Kirk. I'm going to be teaching you guys today a little bit about the different muscle types. We're really going to focus only on the skeletal muscle. And before we get into that, let me give you a rundown of what the other two muscle types are like. So the other two muscle types that we have in our body are smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. And these muscles are muscles that operate involuntarily. That means we don't have to have conscious perception of what's going on. Like your heart beats when it wants to, and your body moves food through its systems when it wants to, which is great because if we had to focus on that, that'd be a lot of problems and such. But also what you need to know about these muscles is smooth muscle is not nucleated. By nucleated, I mean that these muscles don't really possess any mitochondria. And as you've learned in your intro biology classes, mitochondria are like the powerhouse of the cells. So they're pretty much pushing things through and making things tick. Whereas in the heart, however, we have a bunch of mitochondria. They are highly nucleated because a lot of things that happen in the heart require oxygen, which is where this thing that you'll learn later called oxidative phosphorylation happens in the mitochondria, and we need that for our blood, in our blood tissue, and our regular tissue. But we'll get into that later, but those are the main things that you want to understand about smooth muscle tissue as well as cardiac muscle tissue. Now, skeletal muscle tissue, however, is the only voluntary muscle that we have in our entire body. And this is important because you couldn't move your hands, you couldn't walk or do any of those fundamental things that you like to do when you so choose. But with skeletal muscle, we're going to focus on today is just the breakdown in this first part of the video. And then we'll get into how it works on a cellular and a neurological level later on. So first, we have our muscle, right? Imagine we have like this your bicep, tricep, whatever you so choose to look at. And if you look at this frame right here, we have a zoomed in picture of that muscle fiber. And we go down, and this is now called a fasciculi. So within that muscle fiber, there are little bundles of unique muscle fibers all within there. Now within those fasciculi, we break them down even further, and we take one single fasciculi. If I pulled one single one out, then we would now have a muscle fiber, or people call it a muscle cell. Either one is fine. They're interchangeable as well as synonymous. Now within those muscle fibers, if we were to look at a muscle fiber, if I were to take it out, rotate it and such, you would see that it has these little other fibers in it, and they're called myofibrils. To give you a better, example for you to understand, I want to use this cup right here, right? So let's say this cup full with these sticks was our muscle, right? So we got the cup full with these sticks. Now let's say within the cups, we have these bundles of sticks, are bundled together. These would now be our fasciculi, right? Now let's say if I took one of these bundles out. Take one of these bundles out, and I pull a single stick. Let me get it out. A single stick out of this bundle, right? This is now a muscle fiber. Now in that muscle fiber, you see how on this stick there are, if it'll go into focus, there are little striations and such. Those would then be our myofibrils. Now, stepping away from the myofibrils, or stepping into the myofibrils, we have these contractile units, and they're called sarcomeres. Now, these sarcomeres are important because they're the main things that, researchers as well as physiologists use in order to determine, length and width and contractile force of the muscle. They're pretty much broken down in such a fashion to make it easier for scientists to analyze and better understand the muscle fibers. Now, if we're looking from it, moving from the actual muscle fibers as a whole, how do we actually get these bad boys to maneuver when we want to? Well, we're going to take a step down into something I like to call the motor unit. So, fix my light right here. So we have the motor unit, right? So how does this even work? So the first thing that you're going to want to understand is that a motor unit is just a single neurological neuron that innervates multiple muscle fibers. Now, although that is true, the reverse is not true. You don't have a single muscle fiber that is connected to a bunch of neurons. That might be a question that pops up on your test, so that you might see on a quiz or an exam. So it's key to remember that it's only one single neuron that can innervate multiple muscle fibers. By innervate, what I mean is that it can control and send impulses as it so choose. So here we have our actual neuron. We have the actual motor unit. And what happens is when we get something called an action potential, it travels down the neuron through these things called, these are called myelin sheath. And if you look at the peripheral or the nervous system, they might be called oligodendrocytes, or they might be called Schwann cells, depending on what you're looking at. But we get a nerve impulse, and it travels down the actual axon and down to the terminal endings of this nerve. And once it reaches the nerve, we then have these muscle fibers. These things represented right here in green. And what it does is it tells those muscle fibers to perform a specific action. So if I have my hands right here, what's happening right now is that there's essentially a muscle fiber going down right here. I mean, an impulse going down right here that's telling my finger to move. That's exactly how it works in, I guess, in real time, essentially. Now, if we're looking at what these look like on a, I guess what you would say a broader scale, when you're running and when you're jumping and such, you will see a bunch of different action potentials firing at the same time. But unfortunately, you're not going to need to know that for this course. But that's all that we have for this first part of the video, and I'll get to the second part of the video. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Keep in mind that these videos are just designed to give you a broad, I guess, understanding of what we're looking at. We're not going to go over the finite details. Those are all things that you can find in your textbooks, for sure. But if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.